you talked about just the importance of mindset, right? And there's just a wealth of research to show that actions follow beliefs. If we think that, peak performance aging isn't a reality, we're not going to do all of the great things that we've been talking about, right? So you talked a little bit about positive mindset around aging. I think that for if people were hanging a question mark around what does that mean, ask yourself the question, what does aging look like to you, right? If you start to journal about that and you start to see some language that's really limiting, that's negative, right? That's a real opportunity. Build some awareness around your language and start to challenge, start to reframe and really cultivate that growth mindset around aging. And I want to tap into and really double click this one piece, Stephen, because we're getting questions about this in the chat is, well, you talked about, becoming risk averse as we get older. And it does seem like fear becomes it tends to have an increasingly larger role in our lives as we get older. So what happens, this is the question that we keep getting, what happens if the thing you want to do is actually dangerous, right?
Okay,
Should we be
this is a great question because folks, you have to like. I'm a good skier. I'm not a park skier. When I started this, I literally I could do 0 tricks and I was terrified, terrified. And at the core of the methodology we used, and this is where I want to start this conversation. So one of the big insights that we had from a flow perspective is we talked earlier, everybody knows the challenge skills balance is flow's most important trick. For reasons covered in Art Impossible, like metaphorically, we always say that in people that it's usually, that means that the ideal sweet spot is when the challenge is about 4%. That's a metaphor. That's not a real number, but it's a metaphorical, useful number greater than your skills, right? This allows you to stretch, but not snap. And it turns out that as we age, that challenge skill spot tends to shrink. The reason is allostatic load, which is essentially the impact of trauma over time on your nervous system and your physiology. And what happens is by the time we get into our 50s, especially for like challenging, physical, dangerous kind of stuff, it's really small. It's about 1 inch. So when I went into my Nara Country adventure, here was my thinking. What was my let me give you my backup plan. And let me tell you, so as a big mountain skier, which is what I was, that was what I did. That was my primary activity, right? So I was like walking right into the very trap that Mike warned me about. Don't get to be 80 as a big mountain skier, because 80 as a big mountain skier, the only way you get into flow is by taking greater and greater risks and pushing that edge and pushing that edge. I thought, okay, if I can learn to park ski, I'm going to learn to creatively interpret the terrain in a million different ways. And if I can get to intermediate is sort of where you take control of your fate. You don't have the random accidents and you can sort of stay safe from that point forward. Not 100%, but a lot better. And so I figured if I get to intermediate, suddenly I had a million new creative ways to get into flow on the mountain, right? I didn't just have this one risk-based way. So it was a brilliant plan, provided I could get to intermediate safely. And how I decided to do that is we had a bunch of different embodied cog ideas that influenced how we approach the mountain. But the starting point was go 1 inch at a time, literally 1 inch at a time. Go so much slower than you possibly thought you would go, and so much slower than I would normally. So I would have to go home frustrated. I would make progress, but not nearly enough for my ego, and I would go home like that. I kept right. It took me a while to sort of get used to it because I'm a hard charger. I don't go slow. I don't go 1% at a time. But I was not going to the hospital, and I wasn't getting hurt, and I was going to see if I could get it done. And it turned out it worked brilliantly. And it actually, you end up being able to widen back out the challenge skills balance a little bit. But it was a really cool insight. We're now entering into a study where we're actually directly measuring allostatic load, challenge skills balance, and this stuff in older adults. So we're going to get more information on this. But that was, so one, go really slowly. You have to and it's really, for me, it was really about, one was checking at my fear at the door, and two was checking my ego at the door. And I had to check both of them at the door. And I really like I had to really get used to like being a 2-year-old on a ski mountain. I mean, like, trying to learn to ski backwards at 53, that was pretty.